Welcome everybody to this Monday night live chat show today. I've got Alison, the physio, and all the way from Portland in Oregon, Tracy Hooper. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining us live, and thanks for joining on YouTube and the Negotiators podcast. In these dark days in the winter here, it's really important that we stretch. It's really important that we do some exercises, stand up from our computers after 17 minutes and stretch. So I've asked Alison Gross, my physiotherapist, to join us and to give us some exercises. So Ali, the physio, is based at her sports injury clinic in Woking in Surrey. And Ali, over to you for a few stretches for us.
Hello everybody, sorry I was just telling my husband off because he was in the background there during the fire. Hi everybody.
Poor guy.
So in this cold weather, it's even more important that you stretch. I've just come back from a really cold, wet dog walk. And actually, I thought if you don't stretch, your muscles feel so tight. So just remember, if you're going out to do any exercise, you need to stretch your calves, stretch your quad muscles. Do you know all these stretches? I think I'll have to show them to you again. So you can't see me very well. You're going to see the top half. But you're going to stretch the front of your thighs here.
Stand back a bit if you can. Stand back. Yep.
I'll be fire if I stand back any further. Okay, that can't get much further than that. So you're going to hold on to the back of onto your foot or onto your trousers and just stretch the front of your leg. You should hold on to something. There's somebody there doing it too. Well done, whoever that is.
There's a few of us doing it.
Stand up, that was you, Derek. Stand up straight and let your thigh that you're stretching actually go down level with the other leg. So you get a good pull.
Oh, we got a frozen broadband. That was obviously a really good stretch there, Alison. Yeah, looks like a broadband's. So we might be going over to Portland and Oregon straight away, I think, if Alison's broadband has no, she's back in, I think. So must have been a good stretch if it broke the broadband in Woking. Okay, let's go straight over to Tracy Hooper. We normally have a lot of background people working all the switches. Today we've just got me. So Tracy, are you there?
I am.
Okay, fantastic. Well, let me introduce Tracy Hooper, who was a CBS News anchor on the East Coast of America, and then a reporter, and ran all sorts of shows for a number of years before she moved to Portland in Oregon, the other side of the United States, and in fact 5,055 miles away from Lincolnshire, where our last guest last week, Kate Atkin, comes from. So I looked it up, 5,055 miles, 0.4 actually, to be accurate, because we like a bit of accuracy. Tracy runs the Confidence Project, and she's worked with a lot of young people that really need confidence and looking out into the world. Welcome, Tracy. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you, Derek, for having me today. It's early morning in Portland, Oregon, and we are known for having the gorgeous Columbia River Gorge, which is the Columbia River, which leads to the Pacific Ocean, and there's extraordinary hiking trails that you could do every day for the rest of your life and see something new.
Wow. Is the Columbia River the one that goes through the Grand Canyon, or am I mixing my geography up?
You're mixing your geography up, but the Grand Canyon is beautiful too. That's the Colorado River.
Colorado. I knew I was close. Close. That's brilliant. Now, news anchor and interviewing some high profile people. Tell us about that, and tell us the most difficult interview you had to conduct.
Well, the most difficult interview I had to conduct was after the Challenger exploded, the Challenger spacecraft. I was at WFSB in Hartford, Connecticut, and Krista McAuliffe, who was the first teacher in space, and it was a very big deal, as you can imagine, was from New Hampshire, and I was working in Connecticut, so very close to adjoining states. And of course, we all were in the newsroom watching the Challenger take off, and within a minute it exploded on this, crystal clear blue day in Florida, and we all looked at each other and thought, oh my gosh, this is not the story we expected. It never is. And so my most difficult interview was talking with teachers whose children in the classroom were watching this take this experience happen because it was the first teacher in space. So we had all these young children who watched this explosion. So of course we did not interview the children, but we interviewed teachers and principals and parents, and it was heartbreaking. And this is the 35th anniversary. I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal about the 35th anniversary of that. So that was my hardest interview. But a lot of other ones, the expression in TV news is, if it bleeds, it leads. So we would cover house fires and murders and accidents. And one of the most difficult parts was being objective and yet being compassionate about the story. When someone's house burns down, our job is to talk with the homeowner, but that's the hardest job in the world. And my job mostly, and I talk about this often, Derek, is to listen. The best reporters in the world have a short, sharp question, and then they stop talking.
And did you get emotionally involved in any of these stories yourself?
I did a whole series about lead paint poisoning in children in Connecticut. And there were, in the 70s and before, lead paint was common. And if you lived in a place where the paint was chipping and you had a baby who was crawling on the ground, crawling on the floor, they were eating lead paint. And there was all kinds of brain damage that happened accordingly. So I got very involved in that kind of story because I was talking with parents who had perfectly healthy children who were not healthy anymore. It was hard. And so, I didn't stay in news forever. I thought to myself, I don't want to chase fire engines the rest of my life. I want to do other work where I can still use my skills, but not feel like I have to compromise some of my values in terms of being able to be emotional and be able to be empathetic to people I'm talking with.
And were any people rude to you?
Oh my gosh, yes. One of the funniest stories, it wasn't funny then, but there was a mayor, William Donald Schaefer. He was the mayor of Baltimore, Maryland, where I'm from, which is near Washington, D.C. And he was married to the city. He loved the city of Baltimore. He was devoted to it. He never married himself. He was a devoted servant of the city of Baltimore. And one time we had switched from twice a week garbage collection, the city, to once a week. And so there were reporters gathered around William Donald Schaefer. And I said to him, Mr. Mayor, please tell us why you've switched from twice a week garbage collection to once. And he said, you media people push me too hard. And he stuck his finger in my face and I was scared to death. And I just stood there with that microphone in my hand. And I thought, don't move, Tracy, don't move. He'll dig his own grave with this. And he yelled at me for a while. And then he sent me an email when I moved to Hartford, Connecticut for another job. And he said, great job at WBAL. And I thought, here's this guy who was so intimidating, who ended up being a support of my work. But that was scary. Great. And he was rude.
My next question was going to be, who was the nicest person before we switched to the West Coast of the USA?
The nicest person. I love that question. I need to think about that. I'll come back to that. I had the privilege of being in people's living rooms and kitchens and family rooms every single night on television. And so people felt like they got to know me in the markets where I worked. And in those days, I would say it was a kinder, gentler world. And people were not pointing their fingers at you and criticizing you. I will tell you a really funny story. I was walking with a friend and we got into an elevator, and this woman, there were two women in the elevator and the door closed, and my name is Bagley. My maiden name is Bagley, and that's the name I used on television. And this woman looked at her friend and she said, is that Tracy Bagley? And her friend said, oh, no, she's much fatter than that. And she said, oh no, I think that is Tracy Bagley. And they were talking with me in an elevator as if I weren't there. And when we got out of the elevator, my friend said to me, Tracy, how humiliating. I said, Mary, they think of me as not a real person because I'm in their television box every night. Wow. They think I'm not human. And anyway, it makes for a great story. What did they say? Your worst experiences make your best stories. Yeah, people never want to hear about how the fabulous trip you had, the flight was flawless, you had gorgeous weather. No, they want to know that you got, waylaid and your luggage got lost. And and so forth.
Well, it's a bit like doing that psychology in NLP, associating and disassociating from the emotions. You almost were floating in the lift by the sound of that. How interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just listening. So you got married, you had 3 girls, and you moved right across the US because of your husband's job. Now 3 girls, that sounds like 3 girls, 4 women in the family. That sounds like some tough negotiations went on there. Were they
Yeah.
good negotiators, your girls?
Quite good negotiators. Our middle daughter, Eleanor, should have been a lawyer. She is a therapist. She's a marriage and family therapist now, all grown, our girls. But Eleanor was quite the negotiator, and you would appreciate this, Derek, with your background. One time, Eleanor really wanted to have a pet. And Henry, my husband, is allergic to anything with hair, with dander. So we said, Eleanor, you can't get a pet. Daddy is allergic to everything. How about a bird? No, I want something that's going to hold still. How about a fish? No, I want something I can pet. Well, Eleanor, I'm sorry, you can't get a pet. She looked at us one day and she said, you think maybe when Daddy moves out, we can get a pet? I said to her, Eleanor, you're going to move out before Daddy's moving out. So she was always, you know, trying to win the day. And sometimes she did, but I was a firm parent, I must say.
Wow, well done. We're going to switch to Ali, the physio, as she's here, and just take a couple of exercises, give you a chance for a glass of water. Tracy, are you there, Ali? And can
I'm here. I'm here. I don't know what happened last time. Sorry about that.
Well, you were just doing that fabulous exercise, and you psyched out your broadband. I think that's actually what happened.
At the same time as the dog jumped up as well, so just as well you didn't see that. So let's ignore leg exercises and do some neck exercises. I know I always bore you with this, but it's so important. You know, it's cold, you want to be all rounded and keep cozy, and then you're stretching all those muscles in your neck and not moving them properly. Remember, shoulder blades back and down. I love it when I say this because everybody sits up. It's great.
I'm going to put everybody on gallery view and check the body language that everyone's doing this exercise. So you're going to be caught on camera. Come on, Wilkie, just get a grip.
Nice shoulders relaxed, nice space between the ears and the shoulders, shoulder blades back and down. And then in that position, you can take a nice breath in, just expand those lungs and then breathe out. Just get your rib cage moving a bit. Do that again, big breath in and out. And already you've opened up your oxygen, your chest, you've got more oxygen levels, make you feel more awake. And then you can give yourself a little stretch, or a big stretch actually. Just take your head right round to one side and hold that for a few seconds. Back to the center and then round to the other side. And just feel that lovely stretch all down from the ear right down to the shoulder and back to the center. And then just take your shoulders in a backward circle and let them relax. And then one more deep breath and out. And then you're good to go. So if you do that after half an hour or 45 minutes at your computer, then you'll feel much more awake and you won't have a stiff neck at the end of the day if you're spending a lot of time working at the PC. So there you are. There's one little stretch for you.
Now, what's the benefit of stretching? Let's go back to some basics for people like me that always forgets what you've told me after I've left your clinic.
Okay, so if you're talking about stretching, when you're sitting, it's basically if you sit in one position all the time, your muscles become tense and the fibers become shorter. So after a while, they get set like that. And this isn't good for your joints or for your muscles or for anything. So if you stretch them out, you actually lengthen those fibers and you feel much better. So that's the sitting at the computer type of thing. But if you're out exercising, you use those muscles, the fibers are working hard. So afterwards, if you give them a little stretch, then they will feel much more relaxed the next day. You won't have what we call DOMS, I forgot what it stands for. Anyway, it means pain after exercise, stiffness in your muscles the next day. So it's just important to stretch them out because all the time you're using them or contracting them, they become quite stiff. So it's important to stretch out the fibers. Makes a big difference.
Okay, and one last question. So sports men and sports women now take ice baths straight after playing games. What does that do to the muscles?
Oh, well, you see, that's a bit controversial because actually they're not doing that anymore because they decided perhaps it wasn't such a great idea. My theory, My theory is that the guys just, or girls just didn't like it, so they stopped doing it. But the idea was that you take away any inflammation, because actually when you really use a muscle hard, you're causing lots of tiny little micro tears in the fibers of the muscle when you're really contracting it. So if you're a sprinter and you've really gone for it, you've probably got some minor abrasions in your muscles, if you like. So the idea of the ice was to actually take the swelling down if there was any after exercise. But it's a kind of controversial thing. Some people think it's great, others are not so keen. I actually am not so keen, except in elite athletes where they really have pushed themselves hard. Most of my patients, like Derek, are what should we call the weekend athletes? Would that be good? Or
I thought you were going to put Godfrey and I into that elite athlete class.
no, nearly. You're almost there, guys. Not quite. But
We're really disappointed, Ali. Really disappointed. Perhaps if you can stay on, we'll come back to you, but I'm going to switch back to Tracy, if you're there, Tracy, and unmuted. Tracy, you do a lot of voiceover, you told me, and tell us a bit about that. How does that work?
Well, voiceover work is rich work. You get to, there are books on tape, there are corporate videos, educational videos that you can record, television commercials. And I really have focused on corporate work. A woman named Rhea Fiken, who was a longtime newswoman who I met early in my career, she said, no matter what you do, when you get out of TV news, don't get into commercial work. Because if you do commercial work, if you're on camera doing commercials, people will never take you seriously as a newswoman again. And I really appreciated that piece of advice. And so I've done I do radio and TV commercials, but it's only voiceover, it's not on camera. And it's wonderful. It's a way to interpret a story that someone has written. For a long time, I produced corporate videos myself. So I wrote them and produced them and hosted them and voiced them. But now mostly I do my own video, a monthly video, and that's really the only voice work that I do. Occasionally I'll have a client back east on the East Coast, but for the most part, the Confidence Project keeps me busy. But you know what, we all speak for a living. Unless we are writers and we live in a room and we never communicate with people, on some level we're all public speakers. And that's really what voiceover work is about. I do have my own voice coach. Her name is Linda Bryce. She's a world-renowned voice coach for singers and speakers. And she has taught me a lot about the breath work. Ali was talking about taking a deep breath. I mean, the most of our power comes from the center, comes from our diaphragm. And when we get nervous, we tend to breathe up here. We try to get all the breath up in the upper part of our chest, but the real power comes in your belly. So that was a game changer for me when I learned that I could get more energy, more agency by speaking, by getting more breath in the middle part of my body. So I love voice work. It's fun. You get to interpret what people are writing. And I think, our voices are part of our personal and professional identity. How we sound and the words we use make a big impact on what people think about us.
Fantastic. And you're a lifelong learner, like everybody on here, almost everybody on the chat shows, lifelong learners. Isn't it interesting? We learn things. You learned that after you were a news anchor about breathing to keep cool. And we all sometimes wish we knew things before, but we have to keep learning.
Exactly. That's right. The other piece is that Linda taught me that that you can get into a meditative state with 4 deep belly breaths. And, before I'm doing anything important like this can be anxiety producing. I'm meeting people from all over the world, and I want to be able to be of service to you. Those of us who are public speakers, it's not so much about our message. It's more being in service to you. Like, what do you need to hear? And what I always try to prepare myself so that my anxiety gets lowered by deep breathing. And then Derek, you and I talked about power posing. Power posing is a technique that was researched by Amy Cuddy, and she's a social psychologist. And some people have felt that her research wasn't duplicatable. But I find when I stand like this for 2 minutes with my hands on my hips or my arms up in the air, that I feel more confident. I feel more ready to present to you.
Absolutely, Tracy, and I agree with you totally. And before I do a talk or a speech, I walk around with my hands on my hips, hoping that the delegates won't see me and think they've got some stark raving loony going to speak to them. But actually, I rationalized it, and an animal makes itself bigger to become more confident, a cat or a dog when it's under threat. And therefore, that's all we're doing, aren't we? We're making our body bigger, and the mind-body connection is immediate. And therefore, we're creating hormones and endorphins in our brain to make us feel more confident. And
well, Derek, I also read an interesting study out of the University of British Columbia and San Francisco State University that said even blind runners do this when they cross the finish line. So when we feel good, we take up space, we puff out our chest. And what we tend to do before something that's important, an interview, a difficult conversation, making a presentation, is we tend to hover over our devices. Let me check one more email. Let me look at my text. And that pulls us into what Amy Cuddy calls a personal powerlessness pose. So to Allie's point, the more we can pull our shoulders down and away from our ears and have our, what else did you say, Allie? We have to have our shoulder blades back.
yeah, shoulder blades back. Absolutely.
Yeah, the better we can feel. It's as if our body is telling our mind that we can do it. If we depended on our mind to say, good job, you can do this, we have that mean, I mean, most of us, I do, have that mean girl in my head who says you shouldn't, and Kate was talking about that last week, Kate Atkins, about the imposter syndrome, or I like the way you referred to it, Kate, you referred to it as the imposter phenomenon, because it's that chatter, it's not a syndrome. That was enlightening. Thank you for that, Kate. But if we waited for our minds to tell our bodies we could do something, we wouldn't. So let our bodies go to work for us. And then we give off that air of confidence, both for ourselves and for other people. I love it. I think
also exercise helps our thinking process. And when we come back to Ali, but I want to ask you a couple of questions. I want Ali to tell us about this app she recommended to me called Headspace, because the whole thing about Headspace is about breathing. And in fact, it puts me in a meditative state almost in about a minute, and I sort of fall asleep or go into alpha state. So Ali, if that's okay. But before we do that, Tracy, tell me about the Confidence Project. But just tell me, before, you mentioned when we first met about getting school children into your house, and you thought 2 or 3 would come, and you had half a school.
Yeah. Well, some women I know here in Portland, Oregon, had created a women's leadership program, and they wanted to invite college graduates, women, to come to Portland. They all interviewed, and 6 women were accepted into this program. And it was a year-long program. They lived in community. They had paid internships. They did community service. And they said to me, Tracy, would you, this was 7 years ago, would you host an etiquette evening? And I said, absolutely. Anything to promote civility in the world. So these 6 young women came to our house, and I thought I would literally skim over, how do you introduce yourself? How do you introduce someone else? How do you join a conversation that's already started? How do you know when not to join a conversation, and so forth? And Derek, these young women, well-educated, looked at me like they'd never heard this before. And after about a half an hour, I said, would you all like to have a workshop, and you can bring your friends and we'll practice some of these skills? And they said, great. 1 month later, I had 30 young people in our living room. And I looked around the room and I said, and I only knew those six women. I didn't know anybody else. And I said, does anybody know why you're here tonight? And somebody raised their hand and said, I heard this is a crash course in becoming a grown-up. And I thought, there is a business here. And of course, it started with young women, but it has expanded to men and women of all ages. And now I do a lot of corporate work, because I find that some people never learn the skills, and they can be learned. That's the beautiful part of confidence. It can be learned. I mean, there's a part of it that's in our genes. That's a part of the personality we were born with. But the rest of it comes from taking action. And it's an equal opportunity project. It doesn't matter how much schooling you have, or where you come from, or what neighborhood you grew up in, or what your parents did for a living. Confidence can be learned. And I love that. So once you learn these skills, sometimes you get out of practice. And what I found that there are a lot of young people who aren't familiar with these skills, and it's gone way beyond how do you introduce yourself? It's how do you stand up for yourself? How do you speak truth to power? What do you do if you're constantly interrupted? You know, the whole world has expanded. How do you give feedback? That's a big part of what we do. But what I found is that if you get out of practice, then it's hard to kind of up those skills again. And what I find in my work is that there are a lot of people who are in the early to mid part of their careers. They're in their 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s. And they're saying, I'm not getting promoted, or I feel like I'm invisible, or I'm not taken seriously. And then we begin to talk about how they present themselves, how they show up in the room, and how that can affect what people think of them in terms of their confidence and their competence. Because if we don't enter with confidence, then people assume wrongly that we may not be competent when we are. So that was a long answer. I started with young women. Now I work with people of all ages, and I love the work. And I've always said it's the second best job I've ever had. You know, raising our daughters was the best. This is the second best.
Fantastic. Well, we'll switch back to Surrey and back to Ali, and then we'll come back to you, Tracy, if that's okay.
Please.
Ali.
Hey, you want to know about Headspace, don't you? So,
well, I thought the others might want to know about it, because you recommended it to me. I was my usual skeptical self, but tried it, and I bought it for a year, and I use it every day.
Okay, so it's basically a mindfulness app, and it's probably the original mindfulness app made by a chap called Andy, who is a psychologist, but actually learned him for himself because he needed it because he was having some difficult times. And I recommend it to loads of my patients because it's great if you've got a lot going on in your life, you've got pain that is taking a while to go away, there's just too much on and you can't quiet your mind. And especially I think in this COVID year that we've had where there's lots of anxieties, you know, sometimes the voices in the head keep chatting and you can't calm down. So it's about learning to not listen to those things. And as Derek did say earlier, you use it basically by doing breathing. But it's a little bit like, imagine you were sitting by the motorway or the freeway if you're in the States, lots of noisy traffic, and you know you can hear it really loudly. If you then practice the mindfulness, the freeway doesn't change, the motorway doesn't change, the noise is there, but you don't hear it because your mind has taken you somewhere else. And it's actually a really useful technique. My elder son's a psychiatrist and he uses it himself and he gets a lot of his patients to use it too. But it's for anybody. It's not, you don't have to have a mental health issue. It's basically to help you to calm your mind a bit actually and take yourself away from those thoughts that you don't want to think about at the moment. And if Derek can do it, I promise you anyone can do it. Derek.
Thanks for that, Ali. It's always nice to come on and get some stick from all the guests. And also, it would clearly take your heartbeat down and your blood pressure down, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does all those things. It just stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the one that gives you all the endorphins and the calming bits, and calms down all the sympathetic nervous system, which can get when you're anxious, you breathe too quickly, etc. So it is actually a very useful thing to have.
Fantastic. And one last exercise before we go back to Tracy.
Okay, so we just did some things for our neck. Let's try some things for a little bit lower down the back. So basically just put your hands across your front and then take yourself all the way around. And when you get there, take a big breath in, breathe out and return. Make sure those shoulder blades are down and nice and relaxed. And then round to the other side. Take a big breath in. And as you breathe out, return. And that means that you've stretched already this evening, you've stretched your neck and your thoracic spine. And that took us, what, 3 minutes? Not long at all. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ali.
You're welcome.
Stay on. We'll come back to you once we switch the recording off. A last question, I guess, is are you... I saw that South African variant of COVID was in the next postcode to you. Are you totally locked down or have you still got your clinic open?
Oh, sorry. You're still talking to me. Sorry, beg your pardon. Yeah, actually, it's the postcode next door to us, but we're still working because we have all the PPE and we screen patients very carefully. So we're confident that it's safe to come and see us, but we are saying to people, if you don't need to come in, let's have a video conference But if you really need to see us, then that's absolutely fine, because we can keep you safe. So it's a bit of a worry, but I think it's under control, but then I'm not sure they've said that yet, have they? So,
No.
but it's safe where we are. So.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
So Tracy, back to you. You're on mute at the moment, I think. So if you can unmute yourself. So you've written a book and you've been running the Confidence Project for 7 years, and you're a friend now of Patricia Fripp. I know she's been helping you with a massive talk that you've got to deliver. Tell us about the book and the Confidence Project.
Thank you. Well, the book really came from an idea from my own business coach, who's Mark LeBlanc. And Derek, did you say Mark has been on your program?
No, but I know Mark LeBlanc. He's been over to speak at the speaking conference over here.
Yeah. So Patricia Fripp and Mark LeBlanc and I and thousands of other people are members of the National Speakers Association in the United States. And I've been working with Mark for about a year and a half. And when COVID hit, I really thought I was going to lose my business, because everything I did was in front of large groups of people, helping them to connect and communicate with each other. And I looked at Mark one day, like all of us, I felt like I was walking in mud for weeks. And I looked at Mark on a video call and I said, with my head in my hands, and I said, I don't think I can go on. I mean, I can meet with my one-on-one clients virtually, easily, but in terms of group, I think I don't know. And I said to him, I guess I need to come up with a new hello. And he said, Tracy, that's the name of your book. You got to call it The New Hello. And that's what happened. We developed the new hello, what to say and what to do in the new world of work. And it really is a pocket guide, a companion for feeling comfortable as we go back into the office and or working virtually or some hybrid. And it's really pro tips and stories and skills and language that you can use to feel comfortable and confident in this new world of work.
Have you got the book there? Hold it up.
I do.
You must have it there. You're American.
I do. Well, I don't want to be a pushy American, I'll tell you that.
No, I know, and you're not.
But this is the way I look at it. It's a chapter book. If you think, okay, I want to boost my language, I want to be a better communicator, that's chapter 7. If you want to practice camera confidence, how can you present yourself with confidence on camera? That's chapter 6. So people don't feel like they have to read the whole book. I sent one to you, Derek. I wonder if it's arrived yet.
Not yet, Tracy, but I'm looking forward to it.
On its way. And what I did in this book, which I encourage people to do, is come up with language that you can use. For instance, let's say somebody still wants to shake your hand or wants to give you a hug. And I've had people do that to me. Oh, come on, I haven't had COVID, I'm good. And I'm thinking, I don't want to hug you. And so what I've learned to say, and what I've taught people to say is, put your hand over your chest. It's great to see you again today. I'm not ready for hugs, but I'm thrilled we're seeing each other in person. So I give people the language to use, because I believe once the words come out of your mouth, once you hear them come out of your mouth, then you know you can say them again. Otherwise, we get caught up in our shorts. We don't know what to do. It's the unexpected. It's the unanticipated, awkward experience. And then we feel like we've hurt someone's feelings or we've made someone mad. I mean, if we don't shake someone's hand, I've often said to people, I want to keep us both safe. Great to see you again. And then move on. I always tell people, don't dwell. Don't dwell on, sorry, we're not going to shake hands. I know this feels really awkward. Say what you're going to say and move on. My words to use, words to lose segment, Derek, is really powerful, especially with the whole idea of stop apologizing so much. We're apologizing, at least in the States, I hear people apologizing constantly for things like, sorry, I'm not here to take your message, if it's a voicemail, or sorry, I'm late responding to your email, or in the time of COVID, and we're doing video calls. Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry about the dog. Sorry, my Wi-Fi went down. Sorry about my messy background. We're apologizing constantly.
What else could we say though, Tracy? Because, we're a very polite nation in the UK. We like saying sorry.
Yes. Well, think about replacing "I'm sorry" with "thank you." Thank you for your patience with my Wi-Fi. Thank you for understanding about the noise my neighbor is putting on a new roof. Thank you for welcoming my crazy cat. Anytime you can say thank you for your patience, thank you for your understanding, thank you for your flexibility. Now it's a way of acknowledging that you're appreciative that someone is being patient with you or is being flexible with you.
Fantastic. And some people might be wondering how they get this video. You send this video out on email to everybody, like my newsletter?
Yeah, once a month. In fact, I'm recording the video today, and the theme for February is, oh, you know what the theme for February is? It's about taking the benefit of a power nap. There have been all kinds of studies that have shown that very influential, successful people in the world take some kind of a rest during the day, whether it's meditation, like Kate was talking, Allie was talking about, or closing your eyes. Winston Churchill, I'm going to quote him in my video. He said people who think that if you take a nap, that you're not being productive. And he calls those people very unimaginative. And what I'm finding is that a lot of the leaders I work with and employees are exhausted. We thought that we were going to turn the corner with 2021, but life is essentially the same. We are many of us still working from home, working on Zoom, and Zoom fatigue is real. And I have found in my own life, if I take a 5 or 10 minute power nap, I'm ready to go for the rest of the day. But we feel guilty about that. Like I'm not a really ambitious person if I don't power through the whole day. Anyway, that's a long way of saying, yes, I have monthly videos that go out the first or second Thursday of the month. And
if
Derek,
people want to be on it, if they put their email address in the chat box, I'll make sure that you get that and you can put them on there.
Thank you.
Is that a deal? Talking about power naps, of course, so you're right, Winston Churchill did take power naps 4 or 5 times a day. He also took a little bit of whiskey with them. I think he had whiskey for breakfast. And the other thing is that
I won't be promoting that.
Yeah, our Prime Minister Boris Johnson's been in the press saying, his people have been denying he has a power nap, as that was weakness. I think he does have a power nap because, of course, his hero was Winston Churchill. And some people don't know that he wrote a book about Churchill. He's the author of a book, which is a really interesting book. It shows some of the negotiations that Churchill got up to in the Second World War, which is fascinating. So
may I share a story that my husband's grandmother used to tell?
Please.
She was a devoted follower of Winston Churchill. She read every book ever written about him and he wrote and so forth. And this is what she used to say. She would say, anyone who thinks that Winston Churchill is not the most brilliant, eloquent, enthusiastic man in the world is an idiot. What do you think, Derek? That's what she would say. She loved Winston Churchill. So I've learned something about him from her.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, very interesting. We've got a few things in the chat box, Tracy. I'll just run through those quickly. Alex Kent says singing is really good training to help with speaking. Paul says voice from the diaphragm. Is that why it's better as a presenter to be standing? That's an interesting question because often when I present on Zoom, I push everything back and stand up.
Yes, it's much better to stand up. I'm sitting down now, and it's mostly because of the confines of my office. I have a shelf above me, but I've thought about that. Maybe I could try that. Let me see.
Well, Ali was nodding at the same time, watching the body language. Yeah, you have to get the camera right. So yeah, don't worry.
You can see me better.
Sure.
But it's a complicated it's a complicated setup at World Headquarters for the Confidence Project. I'll show you behind the scenes. So here I have a lot of light on this side because I have 2 big windows, but I have a shade that I pull down, but I have no light on this side. So I have to have a ring light, and I've covered the ring light in parchment paper, which you can get at the grocery store. because that softens the light, and it's also good for people who wear glasses, so we don't have to see the ring light in our eyes. I'm in a quite a small space. I have actually a cabinet open above me and a light inside the cabinet, which I'm turning on to try to get more light on my face.
Well,
We didn't think we were going to be doing this, did we, everybody? We never thought it was going to be like this all day, every day.
No, and it's almost a year. The 22nd of March program is going to be exactly a year since I did my very first program. So I think we're going to have a party and see if we can get everybody on as possible to share things. Kate Atkins says civility is so important. There's a powerful TED talk on the effects of incivility by Christine Porath, and then Kate has put the link into the chat box. And Tim Durkin says also check out Insight Timer app, over 10,000 meditations for just about any situation, as going to sleep, waking up. It's free. Ava in New Mexico says I use the Timer app as well. Is there an ebook version of the new Hello so people could download that on the Kindle? Alex asks.
Yes, thank you. I believe it will be ready next week. We put everything into the system. There were some errors, and we had to fix those, or they had to fix those. And I will let you know, Derek, and then you can pass it along to everyone. But yes,
Okay.
Thank you. And true to my training, I hope to voice the new Hello as well. And I'll let you know when that comes out. The audiobook will be available at some point.
Brilliant. Kate agrees with you. Great idea to say thank you for your patience, understanding, flexibility. It's so nice to say thank you, isn't it? A lot of people in the UK, a lot of younger people say, oh, it was nothing or no worries when they do things. And I try and take them aside and tell them what the problem is, but they look at me like, it's like, go away, granddad. That's the sort of... So there's a lot of email addresses in the chat box for you lots of people want your video, Tracy. Wow, we must make sure. Right. I'll save this. I'll save this in a minute.
Derek, may I offer a skill about accepting a compliment with confidence?
Please.
Yeah, thinking back on what you said moments ago about it was nothing. How often have you been in a situation where someone says, you did a fabulous job, and you hear the other person say, oh, nah, it was nothing. I mean, it was all the team. I'm just an add-on. Well, think about what that means. Now you are lowering your status, so to speak, because it's as if you don't think you're good enough to have had a good presentation. And the person who's given you the compliment also status has lowered. It's as if, well, maybe I don't have good taste. Maybe she didn't give a good presentation. Maybe that wasn't great. And now both of you feel deflated, as opposed to when someone did, you did a great job. That project was fabulous. You could say, thank you so much. You know, I worked really hard on it and I had great support from the team. Thank you for recognizing. And now everybody feels better. That person's grateful that you accepted their compliment with confidence. And you feel better too, because it's real. Most of the time, people don't give you compliments if it's not genuine. I mean, God knows people are critical of each other all the time. So when someone says something good to us, accept it with confidence. Thank you. I'm really glad you recognize that. That's one of my skills, and I appreciate you recognizing it. For you to say that, that's one of my skills, that's wonderful. People, you know, and confidence is contagious. People want to be around people who feel good about themselves because it elevates everybody in the room.
I think the last 5 minutes for people watching this on YouTube or listening to this on the podcast, they might want to rewind that and listen to that really carefully, and then put it into their vocabulary, into their mindset, etc. I've saved the chat because an awful lot of people want your video. About 20 people want your video, so that's worked. Tracy, we nearly come to the end of the official interview, and I'm going to stop the recording in a minute. Have you got one last tip for everybody? A 1 minute tip? I can see from your eyes that I've caught you unawares there, so that's good.
One last tip. Well, everyone always asks me, how do you know when to enter into a conversation? So let's talk about networking, for instance, because that we all still have to network, we still have to stay connected to each other. And one technique that I offer people is, if now this is when you're in the real world, if it's in person and two people are talking, the technique is toe-to-toe means no. So if two people are toe-to-toe and their eyes are engaged, that means they don't want to be interrupted. But if somebody's foot is turned out to the side and they're gesturing a little bit, that's the classic nonverbal cue that you can enter the conversation and say something as simple as, may I join you? May I join you? You don't need to apologize. Sorry for bothering you. I hope I'm not butting in. No, may I join you? I heard you talking about confidence. And that's a way where you can enter a conversation with confidence and not be pushy, but be pleasant.
Absolutely.
How about that for a helpful tip?
That's a brilliant tip. Thank you so much. Tracy Hooper, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Next week, we have Matt Tunbridge, the car expert, showing us what we do wrong when we negotiate a car. And the week after, we got Chris Cooper, who's done 400 interviews on Voice of America. And the week after that, we've got my friend, the finance guru with the red braces, Justin Urquhart Stewart. So I hope you can join me at 5 p.m. on Monday. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening to this on my podcast, and thanks for watching it on YouTube. And finally, to Ali the physio, thanks for joining us. Tracy Hooper from Portland, Oregon, thank you very much.